Hello, so in this tutorial I'll teach you how to create data access objects in our data access layer. As I explained you before in the previous tutorials, in our framework we have a presentation layer or interface layer, which will then connect with the logic layer, business logic layer, which will then connect with the database layer. Between the logic layer and the database layer we can have a data access layer, which is optional. In this data access layer we can choose two types of architecture. One of these architecture is the Hibernate and the other one is the Hibernate. The Hibernate I explained already in the previous tutorials, now I'll explain the Hibernate architecture. So basically it's a replication of the Java Spring Hibernate architecture and serves to create data access objects. So what are data access objects? It's simply an object that is related with a database table and automatically it inherits a bunch of methods with a bunch of actions that reflect in that table in the database server. Example, let's say that I create a data access object for the table X in some database. Automatically that object will have a bunch of methods like the insert method, the update method, the get method, the count method and other methods, and every time that I call these methods passing the corresponding input, it will execute that action in the database server and automatically it will add a new record there, or I can get some records from the database, everything just by calling this method. This is a very simple way of doing without SQL, without the need of programming SQL. So this calls data access objects. So in order to do that, we'll do that through the Hibernate layer. So first thing to do is to log in our framework, going to advanced workspace, choosing the corresponding projects, and in the left top corner we can see that currently we have here three layers: the interface layer, the logic layer and the database layer. To show the data access layer, we just go to this menu and click show advanced items. Automatically we can see that between the logic and the DB layer it appeared a new layer called SQL. So we just click in this layer and below we have two other data access layers, one which is HORN and the other one which is IHORN. IHORN it means Hibernate object relational mapping. HORN means Hibernate object relational mapping, which is the layer that we want to create our data access objects. So we just expand it, we go to our folder corresponding to the project that we selected, and in here I can create then my Hibernate objects, my data access objects, by clicking in here. Or I could just do this manually based in a diagram, a tables diagram that I already have, or based in some tables that I have in my database server. So where do I have my tables diagram? The tables diagram are in here and the database tables from the server are in here. So when I click in this menu create objects automatically, I can choose if I want to create from the tables from the server or from the diagram. So let's do it from the diagram. We just select the diagram, we select one or more tables in here and we click next. That's it, very simple, very easy. Automatically it creates these three files that we can see here. If we expand one of these files we can see that we have our object here, school. The school object is the data access object that was created corresponding to the school table, and automatically I can see here that it created two other relationships because we did this through the diagram. It detects that school is connected with students and with teachers and automatically gives us the ability, it adds other methods to this object saying give me all the students from my school, give me all the teachers from my school, give me just a few teachers according with these conditions from my school or from these schools. So basically I have all these type of methods that I can use. So in order to see what was the created object, we just click in this object here and automatically we are seeing here the name of the object. We can see the name of the table related with the specific object that we created, and we can see a bunch of other options. In here we can see that every time that we create the school, automatically we have a primary key here, and we can generate the ID based in the PHP logic through here by selecting this increment here, or we choose the default, which is the auto increment. By default, the database server already has this covered through the auto increment generated from the database server, so we just put here the default. If we want to see more advanced options, we just select this menu here, and I can see the parameters maps, the result maps, the relationships, the queries, and other things. So currently we have here two relationships. So in here, if we go below, we should see here two relationships too, which are these two: school student childs, which are here, and the school teacher childs, which is here too. So if we expand this, we can see what we have here. Basically what we are doing here is, in this case, is a relationship one-to-many. This is the name. There are no results class IDs or result maps. And what we have is, I want to return for a specific school the student ID, the school ID, and the name. I want to return these attributes from the student table. And I have here in the keys the correspondent relationship. So the school ID from the school, it needs to be equal to the school ID of the student table, and this is an inner join. So I have a bunch of options here that I can change. So I can do all of this manually. I just did it automatically in a very simple way and very fast way, just to show you the purpose of this. Related to it, the result maps and the parameters maps, or result class or parameters class. This is the maps for the inputs and the outputs of the data. When I call a query or a relationship, in this case, I can give to that query or to that relationship inputs that can be parsed through the map or through a class, and when I get the return of that execution of that query, of that relationship, I can then parse the results to another map. So imagine that when I get these attributes here, imagine that I get the students from the school, from a specific school. In this case, I'll get these three attributes. I'll get a bunch of records, each record with all these three attributes, and let's say that I want to convert the student ID. Instead of being calling student underscore ID, I want it to convert to just ID. So in that case, I'll need to have a result map to do that. Or imagine that I want to convert this record, which it comes in an array format. I want it to convert in an object, in a class object. So I just needed to put here the correspondent result class ID, which I can just found in here. There are some that are created here. I can choose one of them, or I could just create my own and then just select the correspondent ones in here. Very simple, very straightforward. The queries is exactly the same thing. Currently I don't have any query, otherwise it will appear here. If I want to create more queries, I can just simply click here, and I could add a manual through here, selecting if it is insert, query, update, delete, select, and I could type the SQL, or I could go to my UI, or I could just I could simply add the correspondent table and do my own selection, or I could go to my properties here and create my properties here that automatically he creates my SQL. Okay, so another thing that we can do is we can simply create, let's delete this query, so we can simply create all these queries automatically. So we just click here, we choose the correspondent table that we are, so this is the school, as we can see here, this is the school object, the school table, so it's the school. I do update, I choose OK, and currently it creates all the queries that I needed. So as you can see here, it creates a bunch of queries, SQL queries, based just in that selection. And all of them, so I could call the correspondent methods that the data access objects already have, but I could extend that method with specific queries, and then I just need to call the queries according with the correspondent names of that queries. This is just a simple example. So as you can see, I could convert SQL to the UI, the same thing, so I don't need to know SQL. So the same thing I could do in the relationships. I click here and I could create relationships automatically. This is a very simple way of doing this. Another way, if I want to, let's say that I don't have anything created here and I'm doing a new object from scratch. Let's do it, which I can do now. So let's create here and let's put an object called some object. It doesn't really matter the name. So in here I'll just choose the corresponding table, which it can be school again, and what I wanna do here is I wanted to create everything automatically. So I choose this option here, create automatically. I choose the corresponding table and I just do update. Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't need to put this. So if I just do create automatically and I do update, automatically it will create all the things, all the objects correspondent. So I can see that it created me here the correspondent relationships, and I believe it did for the sequel too. Yeah, so it created me a bunch of sequels too here. So this is just an example how you can do the things very fast in a very simple way. So as you can see here, the sum object is already here with the two relationships and the correspondent queries that I created automatically. So this is just to show you a very simple example how can you create an object, a very simple object. So basically the only thing that the object needs by default, it's the name and the table. It's these two fields, that's the only thing that it needs. Then if you want to extend it to something else, you can do it by creating results maps, relationships, queries and other things. Let me show you an example of a project created with a result map. So I can come here to the relationship. So if I click here, or if I go here, which is the same thing, we can just go here and I'll put with maps. If I do the updates, right now I can see that it creates me the result map here for the student with the corresponding attributes, and it creates another result map for the teachers. The same thing, if I go to the parameters map here, I have a school parameter map and I have a school result map here too. In the queries I should have exactly the same thing, parameters maps, corresponding parameters maps for the school, the primary keys for the students, for the teachers, and the same thing for the result maps. If I have all these maps already in another file, I can just include that file here by clicking here plus and go and selecting the corresponding file. That's it, very simple, very straightforward, very basic. That's it. So as you can see here the maps that I just created automatically. Everything that we did here, you can do it manually too. That's your choice, whatever you want to do. Additionally, I should give you another information. So related with the result classes or the parameter classes, when you click here that I showed you before, these classes, the place where you should create them is you go to the library, you go to external libraries, and you see here now data access objects. So in here that's where you can create the classes that you want. So basically you just need to click here and do add Hibernate DAO object. That's it, very simple. Additionally, let me just show you one last thing. So when we were creating the Hibernate objects, if we can click here in the corresponding file, and basically what it does and what will show us, it is the XML file, the correspondent XML file of that object. So currently this current file, like we can see like the schools, we have like it corresponds, the name of the class is school, corresponds to the table school, we have the correspondent ID, we have our relationships, and we have a bunch of queries. This is basically what we created before. If you know XML, you can just edit the XML directly here, and then automatically it will replicate the changes through the editions UIs in here or in these items here. Is exactly the same. And that's it. Thank you very much.